We going to have trouble here.
Released August 29th, 2002, less than a year after Grand Theft Auto 3, and developed by Illusion Softworks, Mafia took the Grand Theft Auto 3 format, but did it in a completely different way. The story was much more grounded and serious, the driving was almost simulation-like, and the gunplay was lethal. Looking back about 20 years later, it's not really impressive in terms of modern sensibilities, but back in 2002, it was honestly incredible. Like, you didn't see this kind of detail and realism in a game, let alone in an open world game. Like, open world games just happened, and people were just impressed that there were open worlds at all. Here, we had an incredibly detailed one. I remember being like really hyped from this game, from reading a PC Gamer review. Like, it looked like the coolest thing, and when I managed to get a copy on PC, I was just blown away by how good it was. Like, the story, the characters, the presentation, everything's just so far ahead of its time. Like, Grand Theft Auto 3 told kind of a goofy and simplistic story with a silent protagonist, where Mafia had like a mature, sprawling narrative in probably one of the most immersive worlds ever created, along with just this incredible music score that gave this game a cinematic feeling that most games of that era just did not have. The story of Mafia's development is extremely interesting. It was originally supposed to be a simple driving game similar to Driver, with a planned release date in 2000. They started working on the game in 1998, which oddly enough is actually before GTA 3 even started development. According to Wikipedia, DMA Design, which would later be renamed to Rockstar, didn't prototype the game until 1999, right after they finished development of Grand Theft Auto 2. Now again, Mafia was planned to come out in the year 2000, but an engine change forced them to push the project back, and, well, nobody wants to admit it, GTA 3 probably had some effect on the final outcome of Mafia. In many ways, Mafia as a game feels kind of like a response to Grand Theft Auto 3. Where GTA 3 is just like a full-ass open world game, Mafia is actually a lot more linear in how it tells its story. Grand Theft Auto 3 is kind of a power fantasy, while Mafia kills you early and often. Cars are heavy and slow compared to GTA's bouncy vehicles. Like, it feels like a completely different direction for open world games that never really got followed up on. It was more about creating a living world that you're a small part of rather than a big action movie sandbox, and we all know which direction the genre went in, you know? That's certainly not a value judgment. Of course, GTA and its sequels are some of the best games ever, but Mafia was trying to do something different and succeeded in its own terms because of that. Set in the city of Lost Heaven, which is basically a stand-in for Chicago in the 1930s, you play as Tommy Angelo, a guy who starts off as a nobody and slowly works his way up the ranks of the Salieri crime family to become a made man. It's the classic rise and fall gangster story, and while it shamelessly cribs from like The Godfather and Goodfellas, it manages to feel unique, especially since this kind of story had never been properly told in the video game medium. Certainly not on this level either. Right from the start, you know things are not going to go well because the whole story's told in a flashback. The framing device is that Tommy is recounting his criminal past to a police detective. We know he's on the run from the Salieris, so for the entire game you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop and see when Tommy goes from golden boy to kiss of death. So it's just different because it's not a story that ends in you taking over the town. Victory is not permanent in this game. It's a story that can only end in tragedy. This is, of course, pretty common in movies and novels, but in video games, stories don't necessarily do that. Only a few games had even really bothered trying at all, toying with this concept at the time, like Plan Escape Torment or Max Payne. It's just not something you see that often. Tragedy isn't, a great reward for beating the game. That's the whole point of there being good endings and bad endings in a lot of games. The story starts pretty slow, maybe too slow depending on who you ask. Tommy starts off as a taxi driver, but a chance encounter gets him involved with the crime family when he helps two gangsters escape from an enemy gang's ambush. So you meet Paulie and Sam and get your first introduction to the Salieri crime family. Things start off small. The first real job you perform for the Don is to smash up a few cars with a baseball bat, and then they pretty quickly escalate escalate by mission 4, you get into the first full-blown shootout of the game. This mission is perfect for illustrating just how different this game was at the time. The job's simple. You drive Polly and Sam back to pick up some protection money. At the third location, things go wrong, and Tommy's forced to rescue Sam from inside this motel. There's no objective markers. You don't know where the enemies are. You just have to get in there and not die. And there's a few things that stand out in the combat of Mafia. For one thing, you have free aiming, which is not common for open world games at the time, or even really for a while. You have health, but it's not Doom. Depending on where you're shot, you can die from very few bullets, so you have to play really cautiously if you want to stay alive. On top of that, when you reload, you dump the entire magazine, like, you know, if you reload in real life. So any ammo left in the clip, that's gone. And you don't get a lot of ammo in this game either, so you have to carefully manage that. So because combat's so lethal, the developers were kind of able to create shootouts that feel a little more realistic than what you see in most games, where you're just like gunning down enemies by the hundreds. Most fights only involve a few enemies at a time. It's just one way the game was made to feel more immersive, while actually kind of dealing with technical limitations at the same time. Two birds, one stone. Directly after that mission is the infamous Fair Play mission, where you have to get first place in a race. Like, its infamy comes entirely from the challenge too. The mission is super hard. I remember it taking, and I'm not joking about this, days to finish this one when I first played the game. The challenge, like, it comes from how difficult the car is to steer too. Pretty much every car you drive feels like steering a boat in Mafia, and it's just another way that this game serves up realism over fun sometimes. But this mission, it feels like they're throwing you in the deep end in a way that they didn't need to. At least now in 2022, there's difficulty options to make this part a little easier if you want. But on PC in 2002, you were stuck. If you want to see the rest of the game, you had to get through this part somehow. It's pretty smooth sailing from there, though. Tommy continues his upward trajectory, becoming a key player in the family, blah, blah. One interesting thing I will say about the story is how it goes out of its way to refute Tommy's attempts at being a good guy. In most games, they make sure to remind the players that they're the good guy, even if they're doing bad things. Mafia subverts that in some pretty devastating ways. Like in the brothel mission, you're ordered to murder a woman named Michelle before killing the manager. Tommy goes against orders and spares her life and tells her to leave town. A similar thing happens in another mission, Omerta, where Salieri orders you to kill his consigliere Frank for giving evidence to the cops. You encounter Frank at the airport with his family, and you being the good guy that you are, you let him go and he escapes, and it seems like the end of it. Much later in the game, you find out your good deeds were pretty meaningless because both Michelle and Frank were eventually killed by other hitmen. There was really nothing you could do about it. In so many games, your character's the center of the world, but not here. The people you worked so hard to save can be killed without you even knowing about it. You just never really saw that in other games. Probably my favorite section of the middle part of the story is where the Salieris get involved with the gang war with their rivals, the Morello. Some of the best missions of the game take place here, like Bon Appetit. The mission with this awesome shootout in an Italian restaurant, and You Lucky Bastard, the mission where you continuously try and fail to kill Sergio Morello, the brother of Don Morello. By the end of the story, pretty much every major character is dead, and not because of some sacrifice or heroic last stand, but because Tommy and Polly decide to rob a bank without telling the family. Things go sideways, and you get the point, right? It's an internally ignoble conclusion, even if it ends with one of the best final missions ever, a firefight in this ornate art history museum. Like, some of the best moments of this game are the shooting sections, but this is actually one of the first games to use gameplay as another method to tell the story. Before Red Dead Redemption had players do mundane things like herd cattle or build a house, Mafia also had missions where there was little to no violence involved. Like the mission where you take your future wife Sarah out on a date, or the one where you move boxes to sneak into the harbor, or the part where you stake out the bank before robbing it. It seems kind of quaint now, but Mafia was one of the first games to prioritize story within the gameplay in such a way that the game wasn't just all action all the time. It wasn't the most exciting stuff, but looking back, it made the story feel more natural and immersive. Like, Mafia was less about creating an immersive world that players could get lost in, and more about creating an immersive story, one that feels credible and interesting and real. Looking back at it now, there are some cheesy and cliche elements, but for the most part, the whole thing holds together quite well, as long as you can get past Polly literally just being Joe Pesci. The ending especially stuck with me too. I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it, but for a game that came out in 2002, It's probably one of those ballsy conclusions in the game I've ever seen. In an interview with Daniel Vivera, the director of the game, he said he started working on the game to pay tribute to Goodfellas and The Godfather. And I'll quote him from here. "As I dug deeper, I began to see these men as people who are unwilling to obey the rules and would rather set their own. And I wanted our game to be serious and tell a story for adults." So there's plenty of adult stories in video games now, but back in 2002, you really didn't get a lot like this, especially without like any fantasy elements at all. Even the original Max Payne had a fantastical drug and some magical realism elements. Mafia has none of that. It also came out to like mostly unanimous praise back in 2002, but the sequels never quite managed to capture what the first game did so well. A remake came out in September 2020, and it pretty much managed to recreate what was good about the original Mafia, and in truth modernize some things that actually genuinely needed it, and is probably the best way to play the game at this time. But the original back in 2002 is kind of lightning in a bottle. Story-wise, it's mostly an all-around improvement. Sarah's more of an actual character in the remake. The switch from stereotypical New York Italian accents to Chicago accents really helps the fact that the game is in a sort of alternate fictional Chicago. But compared to the incredibly tense and challenging shooting of the original game, there is something lost in the cover shooter controls that we get in the remake. Now, again, I think that a lot of the modernization is good, but there's just something about the original's combat that's more tense. Now, if you're just in it for the story, like I said, the remake's probably the best way to play it, and wow, is it much prettier. It just doesn't quite match the greatness of the original. The developers of the remake and of Mafia 3, Hangar 13, have announced a fourth Mafia game that's rumored to be a Gangs of New York-inspired prequel, but as of this writing, they're still saying it's a few years away. I'm cautiously optimistic because while Mafia 3 was kind of a mess when it first came out, it actually did some pretty interesting things with its story, and the remake was pretty solid. So hopefully they'll keep the upward trajectory going and really knock it out of the park with the next game. Like, we've all been burned too often by crappy sequels to classic game series, so I'm not gonna get like ahead of myself with the excitement here, but it's good to hear that at least for now the Mafia series isn't dead yet. Even though Mafia followed in the footsteps of an open world classic like Grand Theft Auto 3, I think its real legacy is as one of the first genuinely successful cinematic experiences in video games. If you think about it, this is a game that's got more in common with The Last of Us than it does with Grand Theft Auto, even if structurally it's got a lot in common with Grand Theft Auto. But it was made years before anything like The Last of Us was even common. And it wasn't just about the story, it also had tactical gunplay and realistic driving physics, and even simulation elements, like police that would pull you over for speeding. Mafia came out at a time when the gaming landscape was changing rapidly. It was experimental in an era of experimentation, but somehow it stands out and even kind of holds up. It could have easily been a colossal failure, but in pretty much every way, the first Mafia game was a huge success and one of the best gangster games of all time. That's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on GameRanx.